Yes, welcome. My name is Joyce Heitman. I'm with Catholic Charities of Southeast Michigan, and I'm part of the Parish Social Ministry leadership team of CCUSA. And Catholic Charities USA is working to reduce poverty in America. And our webinar is presented by Catholic Charities USA and Parish Social Ministry, the leadership team. Let us begin with opening prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. Father, you have given all peoples one common origin. It is your will that they be gathered together as one family in yourself. Fill the hearts of all people with the fire of your love and with the desire to ensure justice for all. By sharing the good things you give us, may we secure an equality for all our brothers and sisters throughout the world. May there be an end to division, strife, and war. May there be a dawning of a truly human society built on love and peace. We ask this in the name of Jesus, our Lord. Amen. And you'll notice we ask that you please mute your phone, use the raise your hand icon for comments and questions, and at the end of our presentations, we'll have a question and answer session. In the role of CCUSA Parish Social Ministry section, this webinar is hosted by Catholic Charities USA Parish Social Ministry Leadership Team. The CCUSA Parish Social Ministry section is an association that provides networking opportunities, resources, and skill development for parish social ministry professionals and volunteers at parishes, dioceses, and Catholic Charities agencies. The focus is on strengthening the capacity of the Catholic community to build a more just and compassionate society and to reduce poverty. CCUSA PSM leadership team produces webinars like this one, publishes newsletters and other printed resources, develops national trainings and workshops, and engages in consulting with fellow parish social ministers. The purpose of this webinar, speakers today will identify those issues CCUSA will advance with Congress and the new administration, and will offer practical strategies on how to motivate and organize a parish community to advocate on an issue. Catholic social teaching reminds us that we are one human family, whatever our national, racial, ethnic, economic, and ideological differences. We are our brothers and sisters keepers. At the core of the virtue of solidarity is the pursuit of justice and peace. Pope Paul VI taught that if you want peace, work for justice. This webinar will present the role of advocacy and highlight CCUSA's legislative priorities, provide resources, and highlight the We Are Salt and Light website, provide a best advocacy effort at the local level in Texas on payday lending. Our speakers today are Lucas Swanepoel, Senior Director, Government Affairs of Catholic Charities USA. Our next speaker is Yvonne Guillen, who is a Catholic Social Teaching Education Coordinator at the Department of Justice and Peace and Human Development at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. And Shannon Rosedale, who is Public Affairs and Relations Manager, Catholic Charities of Fort Worth, Texas. We welcome our speakers, and we welcome you, our audience, for joining us today.
What I'm calling the early priorities of Catholic Charities USA during the 115th Congress. And I preface this with the idea that as things are coming up and as Congress reacts to different things, obviously these things are always evolving, and we're always kind of responding to what are the current challenges. Just again for background, for those of you who follow the makeup of Congress following the last election, obviously the chambers are split with 52 Republicans in the Senate, 48 Democrats, and in the House 241 Republicans to 194 Democrats. I think it's always a useful thing to see the kind of religious breakdown and see really the dramatic kind of bipartisan role that Catholic legislators can play, and really the Catholic community as a whole can really play in discussing congressional and legislative affairs. So as we begin these kind of early days of Congress, obviously you've been following the news. There's been a lot of kind of turmoil and discussions in these first early days. These are some of the key dates as we move through Congress. And these are key because there really are days when Congress must act. And must act means they must pass the budget or the government shuts down. They must pass the debt ceiling or the government possibly defaults. Or really at the end of the fiscal year at September 30th, when we have a number of programs that will be expiring and would either need to be reauthorized prior to that or risk really kind of moving forward without any ongoing authorization. These are the dates that oftentimes in kind of congressional affairs drive a lot of difficult decision making, when a lot of hard choices are made, and oftentimes when things that otherwise can't happen get done because of the must-pass nature of these pieces of legislation. So where does Catholic Charities USA fall into that? Well, obviously in the first few days here, reflective of that early calendar, we're looking at the ongoing budget and appropriations processes. This is a little bit unique this year, whereas usually you only have one ongoing budget and appropriation cycle. This year we're going to have a little bit of an overlap between what is the fiscal year 17 appropriations and fiscal year 18. And as you saw on the previous slide, the fiscal year 17 appropriations were extended through April. But as you probably know, and I'll talk about a little bit in a minute, the fiscal appropriations process for FY18 actually begin as we speak. So they'll be finishing one while already beginning a second, and this creates really kind of a dynamic time as far as how to discuss budget and appropriations process. Obviously, the big one that's dominating much of the conversation in the news is the healthcare conversation. And frankly, right now, I would say on Capitol Hill, much of the conversation is focused on healthcare to such a degree that much of the other stuff is a little bit stalled at this point. So as they begin to work on what a repeal and replace, or what repeal and fix, or whatever it might look like, that really is driving, in these very first days of Congress, a lot of the conversation. And then the third point, another one that Catholic Charities USA has long engaged on, one of great deal of concern for both at the local level and across here at the national level, is really what's happening on the immigration and refugee front. And while Congress has passed, we always push for comprehensive immigration reform as really kind of one of the hopes of the legislative process. This year it's been a little bit more in the regulatory field and looking at the executive orders that have been coming out. One thing that we have weighed in on in these early days is something known as the Bridge Act, which is basically the fix for DACA if DACA were to go away. So just to highlight that as one kind of legislative pieces, while most of the focus has been on non-legislative vehicles at this time. One of the big things that before we get into those three kind of points is really this thing called budget reconciliation. And this is one of those procedural things that generally probably don't interest anybody other than people who work on the Hill or lobbyists here in Washington, but it's really a critical thing to understand in understanding really what is possible and what is likely to happen in this, this Congress. And as you probably know, generally in Washington, D.C., if you want to pass a bill, the House needs to pass it with a majority, and as does the Senate. However, the Senate has generally a law, or the filibuster rule, which is often, if you remember Mr. Smith to Washington, the ability to block legislation even if you're in the minority party, because it required a 60-vote threshold for most legislation to pass. There is one big exception to that, and that is this thing called the budget reconciliation. It has limitations as to what it can be used on and to what extent, and I note some of the limitations there, but it's critically important because in these areas where they are allowed to use budget reconciliation, it requires only a majority of the Senate, meaning with the current makeup, they would be able to pass any legislation with only partisan support, whereas generally you need to find some degree of bipartisan support in the Senate. And so I recognize this mostly because it really impacts how healthcare is going to be done It impacts some of the budget processes. It impacts how tax reform would be done. Just to give you a sense of why this is so important, why you'll hear a lot about it in the news. So as I mentioned, starting with the budget appropriation cycle, things that Catholic Charities USA is focusing on is, again, the continuation of last year's appropriations budget, rolling right into next year's appropriation cycle. What are the budget lines? What are the caps? How much money are we going to spend on discretionary versus military? These are all questions that remain to be solved in the early days of Congress. And I always like to remind people when we have these conversations is I think oftentimes we conflate the budget of the United States, which is the much larger number here on this chart, with what is often the appropriations process. The appropriations process, as a reminder, is really only that line in this chart that deals with discretionary spending. And that is the programs that really need to be reauthorized, or I shouldn't say reauthorized, but refunded every single fiscal year. So generally that is where most of our focus in Washington is on that green line. And as you see, it's been relatively flat for quite a number of years. But because of the budget reconciliation process that I mentioned, it really allows Congress to look at some of the entitlement reforms, looking for entitlement reforms, and that's the yellow line on the chart. So to give you a sense that we are dealing with a much bigger budget process this year and many more programs that would otherwise be probably not politically or legislatively possible, become much more likely and possible during this Congress. And again, just a reminder, give you a sense of why this is important. On the right is just a breakdown of last year's discretionary requests. So if you remember the green line on the previous slide and look at this, really when we talk about programs that benefit low-income individuals and the poor in our communities, we're really looking at only half of all discretionary spending because military takes up about 54%, give or take, on any given year. So this gives you just a sense of what we're looking at on the top line numbers on the left as far as how much money is in both big pots and what is likely to happen this year because of the return of sequester, and that is a process which really limits their ability to spend above certain caps. So a sense kind of what to expect as we move forward. As we already know, the budget will be late. It was supposed to be due February 6th. This is not unusual. Most new administrations, when they come in, take time to come out with their first budget. Actually, the director of the budget office, Mulvaney, had his first vote earlier today, and they're expected to have final vote on his confirmation tomorrow. And once he is confirmed, you'll begin to see the process of the budget offices being staffed and fully filled up. So I think at that time we'll start to see a little bit more action from the new administration on the budget and appropriations process. And as far as where Catholic Charities has been engaged, we have weighed in earlier this year, really with a kind of broad letter to the new administration and to Congress, really hoping that they adopt a budget framework that replaces sequestration, protects low-income entitlement programs such as SNAP and Medicaid, and maintains a circle of protection around funding for programs focused on people in poverty. And this is part of a coalition that Catholic Charities, along with the Bishops' Conference, participate in to really try to lift up the voice of low-income people in our society. The second big question mark in these early days of Congress is health care reform. As things stand today, there's still a great deal of division, and obviously division between the parties, which is not new, but even internally amongst themselves, whether it be Republicans amongst themselves, Democrats amongst themselves, division on both strategy and then on substance. On the strategy end, it's a question of whether they should repeal now and then replace the Affordable Care Act and other aspects of health care at a later time, or whether they should do it all at one go. Because of the budget reconciliation process, it actually limits their ability to do some of the things they want to do in one go. So it does require Democrat buy-in in the Senate, at least, on some of the plans for replacement. And because of these procedural and substantive challenges, things have really been stalled for the last few weeks as they begin the process of finding out what's possible and really what leadership in the House wants to do at the time. As you see here, Catholic Charities wrote to both the House and Senate earlier this year, really urging them that any repeal of the Affordable Care Act is done concurrently with a plan that protects the millions of Americans who have insurance or gained access to health care under the Affordable Care Act and provides access to health care for the millions still living without affordable health care. And that is really the first step in this process of making sure that those people who receive benefits or are able to get access to affordable health care under the Affordable Care Act aren't harmed as we move forward on health care. And then the third major priority is really in the area of immigration and refugees, and this is the one I think has taken a lot of our time in these first couple of weeks, and as responding to the various executive orders that have come out. As you've probably seen in the news, there have been 3 executive orders at this time, border security and internal enforcement, and one on refugee and travel ban. At this point, Catholic Charities has already responded to these various challenges. Catholic Charities USA actually launched an initiative last week to raise money for the program. But at this time, it's a little bit of a question mark because, as you saw last Friday, the Court of Appeals in the Ninth Circuit upheld some of the ban on the refugee and travel ban order. Obviously, we're already seeing interior enforcements moving forward. We're likely to see conversations about the wall funding as we get to the April 28th deadline, with Republicans hoping to put funding for the wall in that budget agreement or that appropriations agreement. And there's still outgoing questions about orders that haven't been done yet, and that is ones related to the public charge or DACA. And what I'll do now is go through a little bit about what the executive orders said and what their impacts are. And also the couple that are still outstanding, there have been draft versions of them, but what they would also do. So on the area of border security and immigration enforcement, some of the major provisions of the executive order obviously is moving forward with the building of the wall, and it increases the number of border patrol agents, increases the use of detention facilities, and the catch and release by requiring detention for all aliens pending removal proceedings. It expedites credible fear determinations by assigning asylum officers to detention centers, and it directs agencies to quantify federal aid to Mexico on an annual basis for 5 years. And while that doesn't necessarily have a direct impact, many see that as really the question, looking and assessing, making Mexico pay for the wall is really that last point there as to how they would measure that. The second one on the interior enforcement, what it does is attempts to defund sanctuary cities, and there's been a lot of conversation about sanctuary cities, and I would just caution a little bit on that to make sure you understand what sanctuary cities can and can't be done, what the federal government can and can't do when it comes to a sanctuary city or state. I think oftentimes the media portrays it as they're going to cut off all funding, but the reality is there are some Supreme Court precedents which limit to the degree they can use that kind of fiscal leverage. Second, changes enforcement priorities to any criminal offenses. We don't know if that's going to be applied as broadly as it has been written, but it is one of the questions that dramatically increases the priority enforcement that was done under the last administration. And here this gives you a map to give you a sense of the sanctuary cities and states that are out there, and really an overlap of where Catholic Charities and the various dioceses overlap with these sanctuary cities. The next aspect is reinstating the Secure Communities Program. This is a program that was in operation up until 2014. And then fifth, it begins the process to impose civil fines for those who facilitate undocumented presence. This is really a provision in there that would empower state and local communities to take action at a local level on people they feel are facilitating undocumented individuals. And obviously, the last point is really increasing the size of the interior enforcement by hiring an additional 10,000 ICE officers. And again, as a caution on a lot of this, there's still a number of questions yet to be solved, a lot of questions still remaining. Things like hiring an additional 10,000 officers also requires funding and Congress to buy in, so just as a sense to give a note of caution on that. And then third, the refugee and travel ban. This is the one that was halted last week by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, particularly those provisions related to the refugee program and the travel ban, the 7 countries that would otherwise be banned for travel to the United States. This is just a quick rundown of what the original executive order does. At this time, it's in a stay. The temporary restraining order is in place. At this point, they're expected to appeal the local 3-judge decision of the Ninth Circuit to the entire bank of the Ninth Circuit. So all the judges on the Ninth Circuit are expected to vote on the decision made by the smaller circuit, or I should say the 3-judge panel. And then the next question is, we don't know what's going to happen next. At this point, the refugee program has been allowed to operate at a limited level. Some of the refugees who were already in the process of coming in have been allowed in, and that's where things stand today. But again, please keep in touch because these things are evolving very quickly and changing as we go forward. And then finally, one that was a draft order that was released out in the public but has not been signed, but just to put on your long-term radar of additional issues is a possible executive order related to DACA and a possible executive order related to what is known as a public charge, and that is, are those people who could be deportable because they really oftentimes, through no fault of their own, needed to rely upon public assistance after they came into the country. At this point, these haven't been released, they haven't been signed, so this is really just for your radar looking forward as we move through these early days of Congress. So how does Catholic Charities engage on these questions of immigration and refugees? Well, really one is a stand in solidarity with immigrant and refugee families. Here's a quote from Sister Donna to the press shortly after one of the executive orders. We've had a number of press releases on this issue moving forward. As I mentioned, the launch of really an ambitious $8 million campaign to assist immigrant and refugee programs across the Catholic Charities Network, and really standing in partnership with our colleagues over at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, with Clinic, and all the other Catholic organizations. Last week, Sister Donna was able to participate in a press event with a number of the Catholic partners across the spectrum doing work in immigration and refugees, really as a stand of solidarity together with this community. And then finally, just a few issues to keep on your radar. These are issues that obviously, if you've been following Catholic Charities Advocacy in the last couple of years, these are issues that were weighed in upon at those times and are likely to come back early in this Congress as we move forward. And we expect to at some point be weighing in on these issues moving forward. So as a reminder, just how can you stay engaged? I really encourage you to sign up for the Washington Weekly. Go to our website and you'll see a link there, sign up. Every Monday we send out an alert as to what's happening in Washington, what we're working on, and really it will help you stay involved as to what we're doing. It also will give you access to our action alerts. We have one active right now related to the refugee ban. So if you go there and sign up, you'll be able to stay involved and really know where Catholic Charities USA has engaged on issues and where you can be of help to us. And as always, I always encourage you to stay connected with our social policy team, with myself, or anybody else on our team, just to let us know what's happening on the ground. I really think one of the great voices for Catholic Charities and advocacy is the ability to bring that local knowledge and experience to bear here in Washington. You often hear about the Washington bubble, and we do all we can to try to break that bubble and really bring your expertise and knowledge here to Washington. So please, I encourage you to stay in touch, and if you see something happen at the local level, please let us know. And with that, I will turn it over to Yvonne.
Great. Thank you so much, Lucas. And thanks, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to be with you all and to share about a new and exciting resource that is available for communities who really want to engage on issues and efforts that protect the vulnerable communities that we work with. Now, this resource is also for parishes who wish to strengthen their social ministry and really aim to be salt and light in the world by putting their faith in action. All right, let's see here. So, wearesaltandlight.org is actually a new website of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development. Now, the resources draw not only from the U.S. Bishops Conference, like the document titled Communities of Salt and Light, but also from many of our trusted collaborators. It really brings together the principles of our social teaching and local pastoral experience in the framework for vibrant Catholic communities. Now, the way the website is broken up is into 4 main sections. As you can see on the PowerPoint presentation, you have the reach out together, the act together, pray together, and learn together. And there really are multiple ways that you can explore the website. If you look at the top right-hand side of the page, you will see the menu icon. When you click on it, you'll see a drop-down menu. Now, if you click on the plus sign next to the Act Together, you will see that one of the options there is Advocacy. And the other way to access the resources is by clicking on resources. Now, if you click on the resource icon, what you'll see is that you can use the different filters that are shown on the page to customize your search. And there are many, many resources again, and so sometimes it's fun to explore what's on here for the different ministries. So I definitely encourage you to use this function when if you're interested in looking for a very specific resource. Now, if you click on the advocacy icon from the drop-down menu we saw earlier, you will see a page that looks like this. And once you click on the word advocacy at the bottom right here, you will be redirected to a series of additional resources you can use for your advocacy efforts. Once you click on it, this is what will come up, and then there's the list there. Now, the first item that you can, look at is USCCB's Action Center, where you can do really a number of things, like sign up for action alerts, also find who your elected officials are. Maybe you want to set up a district visit or a visit, and this is a good opportunity to get familiarized with all the different offices within the state. You might want to find, a piece of legislation or sign up for other information for other actions that are happening. The other item that you can use here is, and that's available to you, is the Action Center for the Catholics Confront Global Poverty Initiative. Now, this project is a collaboration between the U.S. Catholic bishops and Catholic Relief Services, and it really highlights multiple issues, including human trafficking, helping Syrian refugees, as well as hunger and climate change. Another resource is that's on the We Are Signline website is an advocacy toolkit, which gives you a lot of great tips on visiting your members of Congress, and they include, how to set up the meeting, what are some of the best practices, how to follow up, which are all really important steps in planning a meeting with your elected official. On to the next. We also have other ways. We have the U.S. Bishops' Conference Statement of Catholic Citizenship on Political Responsibility. Again, it's really important that we are informed and know what our duties and what our responsibility is. And so this is available for you. And, really now that we have, a new Congress, it's a good opportunity to remain informed on every time we connect with them how to what we should be looking at and what we should be advocating for, and so this is a great resource to use for that. Now, another piece here is more ways to advocate, and really what this is a list of different campaigns that are part of USCCB, like the Justice for Immigrants or the Catholic Climate Covenant or Catholic Mobilizing Network to end the use of the death penalty that we work with or collaborate with. And so these are all different ways you can engage on advocacy. Now, I want to switch over and talk a bit about the connection between parish social ministry and advocacy, because these are really important. These are really important work that it has been happening and continues to, and I think that it's important to highlight some of the key aspects of why they are important not only for our communities but then for the people also that we serve. Now, as most of you already know, parishes across the country are really committed to sharing not only their time, their money, but also their leadership to numerous efforts that are really aimed at meeting the needs of their communities. This is true whether the goal of the social ministry is designed to meet the immediate needs or really change the structures that threaten the life and human dignity of all of our neighbors. Now, they are both really equally important, and we definitely want to lift that up. Charitable works and advocacy for social justice are really two distinct but complementary ways in which we can respond to the gospel's call to put not only our love for God, but really our love for our neighbor in action. Now, to live out the gospel we proclaim, we really must respond as best as we can to the diverse needs of and injustices that impact our world, and I think that's very foundational to parish social ministry and really advocacy as well. Charity focuses really, if we break it down, we see that charity focuses on meeting the basic needs and aiding individuals, and this could be anything from donating food to a pantry or tutoring children or maybe sponsoring a refugee family, and there's a lot more examples that I'm sure we can lift up. And then social justice focuses on removing really the root causes and improving structures, right? Systematic structures. Now that, for example, maybe it's expanding access to affordable housing, working to improve the education system, or supporting environmental protection laws. Maybe it's participating in a living wage campaign. Now, all of these issues really impact to some degree the people that are served in parish social ministry, and so I think that's important to note, because it's really a way to start thinking about, well, if these issues impact my communities, is there something that I can do as a person of faith, as a leader in my community, to help solve? Now, engaging in advocacy really means that we are really looking, we are willing to look at the root causes and challenges of our communities, right? And work to advocate with and not simply for those who are directly impacted. This means that really advocacy requires a different kind of relationship with the people who are involved. It is another form of relationship building that not only public officials, as was stated earlier, that's important to develop, but also an opportunity to be in deeper relationship with the people who are actually living the issues, and also to help them in participating in the solutions, which actually is what the Bishop's Catholic Campaign for Human Development is all about. Now, by doing this, you'll often find that people who are in these very dire situations can be very powerful advocates and allies, not only in educating others to understand why it's important to address the causes of circumstances they are in, which is also very critical. Now, luckily, parish social ministry programs that are service-oriented have the advantage of connecting directly with the people who are coming to them for services. This is a good opportunity for leaders really to figure out another way to be in relationship with those people and gain insight into the deeper systematic issues that people are interested in. Now, I would also say that since most, if not all, parish social ministry models hold a relationship component, a foundation exists already that people can build off of for further engagement. And I would say this is definitely a plus for parishes. Now, the We Are Salt and Light website is really a great resource to get started. And in addition to all the resources I mentioned earlier, it also offers success stories of how people of faith from around the country are really working together to create vibrant communities through parish social ministry and advocacy. So I definitely want to encourage everyone to visit it and explore it. Now, on this last slide here, you'll see our 2 Feet of Love in Action resource, which you can also access through the We Are Salt and Light website. It really provides more detail about the connection between social justice and charitable works. All right. Well, I'll thank you for your time, and now I'm going to turn it over to Shannon.
Hello. So I'll be speaking about an example of what happened here in Fort Worth, Texas, and how we were successful in utilizing advocacy efforts here to better the community and get across some of the work that we were doing. So a little bit of background knowledge on that. This is based on a predatory lending and payday lending ordinance being passed in the city of Arlington, Texas. Here in Tarrant County, we have up until about 2015, none of our cities had passed city ordinances. And this dates back to, at the state level, we have been trying to, for a decade now, pass some caps on limits as well as assist in state level protections. And so because of that, in 2013, Texas City stepped up and started regulating that. So where this all began was advocacy groups started forming from churches to schools to social service providers to government officials. We started talking more and educating on the work that needed to be done at the city level. Again, Tarrant County was hesitant on passing anything, and so the city of Arlington, even being willing to consider passing an ordinance, was a huge success for us. We wanted to make sure that we were capitalizing on that and moving forward with it. And so over the years, the movement had continued and focusing on the state efforts as well as this local movement at the city. And so in 2015, when we heard that a city council in Arlington might consider hearing an ordinance, the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops came and hosted a roadshow here in Arlington, Texas, where we gathered multiple stakeholders together to just talk and discuss and really start the education process and gearing up the troops that had been doing so much of this advocacy work. So thankfully, in November 2015, the ordinance was passed. And so right now, I'd just like to share a little bit about how we got there and what led to this success. And so a big part of that, again, was this coming together as a collected, unified, and cohesive group. We represented various stakeholders and impact groups, as well as the bishops and the TCC, Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops, as well as Catholic Charities, but working with other faith-based groups, other schools and educational groups, as well as other social service providers. We wanted to make sure that we were representing and appealing to the City Council on multiple levels. So that included business, economic, faith, and social justice. So what did that look like to really start this movement? Was determining our mission. What did we want to happen? We knew that the end goal was to protect the citizens here and to cap the limit on predatory lending here. So that meant identifying goals. We utilized something called SMART goals, so that is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed goals, as well as making sure that all of the groups involved were really dedicated and focused on the same desired outcome in order to really make that achievable. We knew that various groups had different pieces of interest, but coming together for one designated goal was really how this got passed. And so with that was just creating that strategy. Who is going to take talking to the city council members? Who is going to focus on reaching out to schools? And who would get clients to share their stories? And really being able to bring all aspects of the impacts to the city council and have a general voice being heard. So again, this wasn't an overnight success. There are times when we really didn't think it would happen, that the city council would pass this. Tarrant County has a huge headquarters for payday lenders here. We knew that there are officials in this area who have family members that work for these industries, but we knew that as the time came and when we were ready to go, we had done the back work enough to mobilize those troops and really push forward. And so again, years of work went into this. It was a lot of identifying other people. We frequently would use this theory of leaving an open seat at the table to constantly be thinking, who else do we need to invite to this? Who else needs to be at the table? And who are we missing their voice from? And so that really helped us keep this open mind of organizing the community. This city ordinance would impact the community, and it was important to have their voice there, as well as advocates knowing our clients and knowing our population and knowing how to serve them. As part of that, that was identifying somebody who could speak as the expert to this. We needed to make sure that we had somebody who was a spokesperson for the community. We wanted to go to city council members, not with somebody as an outsider, but somebody who was trusted and respected and really looked to for that. And so we had Father Kelly from Arlington, St. Joseph's in Arlington, who really stepped into that role. And he was the one who went to all the city council meetings. He was always doing the interviews, and that just, it brought a person to light. It was somebody who could be identified as this is an issue that they were passionate about and working on. The other aspect of this was really honing in on resources that we had. The payday lending industry has millions to spend in lobbying. We knew we couldn't organize that much money, that many resources. But we know that we have a strong voice as well as this presence. And so that meant bringing various speakers and voices and stories to city council meetings, really showing up when it mattered and making sure there was not the same person, same three people giving their testimony over and over again, but really digging down and utilizing those connections. Whether it was a different faith-based social service provider having their clients speak, having ours, as well as educational organizations, utilizing the various impacts that we really had. So again, with this, focusing on the key players and the key resources that would make this a successful endeavor. And part of that too was knowing that there would be multiple roles. So again, Father Kelly was our spokesperson, but there's a lot of groundwork that went into that. There was a lot of people still leading and being a leader from behind the scenes. And so part of that, this is probably the hardest challenge of any advocacy effort, is really that communication and communicating effectively. So making sure that we knew who is going to be speaking at meetings, who is leading them, as well as what message were we trying to get across. So not only was it important to make sure that everybody knew the mission and knew the strategy and knew our goals, but were they speaking the same language when you got in front of somebody? So if I went to one city council member and my colleague went to another one, were we getting across those same talking points? And it was so important to do so in order to make sure that we had that same cohesive message back and forth, so that at no point could we be questioned, have a different goal or different outcome or different desire for our success at that point. And so at the end, it really came down to educating and engage. How are we getting our mission across? Revising and relooking. Again, this was years of efforts coming forward. They had worked before as city council members, and really noticing who is going to be their best advocate, who is going to listen to us, and who on the city council identified as somebody who would move this forward and really assist us. And so that was a big piece of utilizing not only here locally, but one of our representatives, he has a task force dedicated to payday lending reform. And so utilizing state level resources, utilizing Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops, and really pulling together all of the availability to make this difference. We know that we can't always do everything on our own, and so we have to reach out and really target those resources that are available to us. Lastly was just getting in front and speaking. Again, that was going to city council meetings and really making sure our voice was heard. I think one of my favorite parts and memories of looking back on all that happened with passing the ordinance was at the city council meetings, they would ask, to have spoken testimony, and people would get up and speak out. And then afterwards, they'd ask if anybody else was there to who felt one way or the other to raise their hand in support or against. And so making sure that we filled that room with as many people in support. So when they called on that, the entire room's hands went up in support of passing this ordinance. You could physically see that visible representation of who was, supporting them, as well as just saying, hey, I'm your constituent and I support this. So holding people accountable for their decisions and for their actions. For a big part of this, we knew once we could get it just to a vote, that was one of the biggest hurdles, because then we knew that the eyes were on them. We would invite media outlets to come and watch the city council meetings, so city council members knew that this was being broadcasted. They knew that it was live. And then afterwards, after the final vote on it, we hosted a press conference outside of the city council hall. And so when it came to a vote, they voted on it. Everyone at the end who was in support of it, which was about 100 people, stood up together and walked out of the room together cheering. And that was just such a cool image, and you could just hear kind of the gasp and oh my goodness comments to see this mass of people who were just truly there supportive and rejoicing in all this hard work that had happened to walk out. And so that's a big part of that, was just celebrating those successes and really showing, you know, it's not just about the one issue, it's about raising your voice and really advocating successfully for bettering your community. And following that up is making sure that you keep that momentum moving. So again, this was just one city in all of Tarrant County, and we know that there are so many more that need to pass that. And so how do we continue moving forward? How do we push and use this momentum that was passed to continue working towards getting other cities in Tarrant County to pass these ordinances? Yeah, so that was a little bit about our success here and the work that was done, and I will turn it back over now.
Yes, on behalf of Catholic Charities PSM leadership team, I'd really like to thank our speakers who gave us great information, shared their passion, their commitment. A lot of educational materials were provided, and we're able now to access more resources because of hearing from people from organizations such as Catholic Charities USA, the Conference of Catholic Bishops, and the Catholic Charities of Fort Worth, Texas. So thank you for pointing us in this direction and really honing in on legislative advocacy. And I believe at this time we're going to take your questions, and it will be led by Scott, who is at CCUSA.
Thank you, Joyce. And yes, we do have a number of questions, and the process will be I will repeat the question that somebody has submitted through the website, and then we will identify who is the most appropriate respondent. So here is one question, and I will read it for the benefit of the group. Since these Catholic groups did not support the current president's opponent, and we are getting from the president exactly what we knew we would, why bother to work against him now that he has all the power? And Lucas, you want to try to have a stab at that? That's a rather loaded question, but I think it's probably one that's on some people's minds.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's part of why we do this, what we do today, and I think why it's so critical that people continue to do this every day. I mean, I always think when we do advocacy, it's not about a person, but it's really about the issues and the people that we try to stand up for. And regardless of how elections turn out, whether you be supportive or not happy about it, the reality is the issues still continue, and the needs of poor and vulnerable communities continue to need to be resolved. And I think that's where, as people of faith, we can bring a unique voice to these conversations and really continue to stand up for those who otherwise can't stand up for themselves.
Great, thank you. And we have another question here, a bit more practical. What are ways to intentionally connect with parishes on advocacy efforts? And I think I might allow both Yvonne and Shannon to respond because you have practical experience in this. Yvonne, would you care to respond first, please?
Sure thing, Scott. My recommendation would be to connect with either the social action coordinator or maybe the diocesan director. It really ranges on who is might be in charge of working on social justice issues or advocacy, and so I think that's a good place to start.
Great, thank you. And Shannon, your practical experience, were there some definitive ways that you connected with parishes that proved successful, and were there ways that maybe proved unsuccessful?
Sure. So a big part, again, as I said, was really utilizing the grassroots effort, utilizing the people who were connected at the most. So we would host different focus groups with parishes, and so it was a lot of reaching out to the different and local parishes and asking, is this a problem that you're seeing in your communities? Is this something that your members are experiencing? Do they have any stories or have experienced any impact because of predatory lending? And can we use that voice and use that to really give this image to a person, as well as would you be interested in looking towards a solution for that? And so here at Catholic Charities Fort Worth, we have a phenomenal parish relations department, and so they really connect us a lot with the local communities, the local parishes, as well as utilizing the Catholic schools here. That was the piece too, was just talking to some of the teachers there as well as students and hearing them, because again, they're the ones living these the realities of different ordinances, or different laws and different legislation, and how that's impacting them. So yes, absolutely, we definitely use them.
Thank you. And I would say that Catholic Charities USA has a very fine printed resource, Catalysts and Collaborators in Parasocial Ministry, which for those of you who are members of Catholic Charities agencies that are members of Catholic Charities USA, this resource is available on our website, CatholicCharitiesUSA.org. If you go to the resources section and select Parasocial Ministry Resources, that is one of the first items that will appear, and it is a comprehensive handbook on how to establish strategic relationships with parishes, not just for the purpose of legislative advocacy, but for any form or expression of parasocial ministry. And if any of our participants today are not members of a Catholic Charities agency that's a member of Catholic Charities USA, I would be happy to share this resource with you in a PDF format. If you would be so kind as to send an email to psm@catholiccharities.org. We have another question. Will this webinar be accessible as a recording? Yes, it will. Again, it will be on the Catholic Charities USA website as a parasocial ministry resource. And if you don't have access to that section reserved for members, again, I would be happy to share with you a recording by your sending me an email at psm@catholiccharities.usa.org. Now, here is another question, and I think I will first direct this to Shannon, because it does speak to the issue of payday lending. How do we engage with all the Catholic parishioners and Catholic legislators who support payday lending, immigrant expulsion, and any benefits for the marginalized?
That is a great question. I think to start off, a big part is utilizing your Catholic conference, your state-level Catholic conference. Texas Catholic Conference is absolutely phenomenal. They are that legislative arm of the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops here in Texas. And so really having them on the ground, they know and have those relationships already with the legislators who are Catholic, or they are constantly meeting with them and know those issues and know them inside out. And so I highly recommend reaching out to them and just finding out if there's a way that you could go and meet with your legislators and go and talk to them and find out on those issues. We use their TCCB's talking points that they've already created, so we know that they align with the Catholic social teaching. We know that we're getting forward our bishops' points and what they want as well as just being able to rely on your faith and say, as Catholics, this is our belief and this is what we are called to do. We are called to support and serve the most vulnerable populations, and that's what that's what we do, and we do it every day. And this bill, this will impact our clients in this way, and really just being able to speak to that and bring a face to it, as well as tying it in back to Catholic social teaching and back to our beliefs that we are rooted in. And then utilizing parishes, really getting to know them, getting to know the members there, getting to speak to them as well, and just able to engage and educate. We found a lot with some of the recent things happening in the country, whether that be immigration or refugees or payday lending specifically, just going and meeting with some of our legislators or our parishes and saying, do you know that this is a fact and, this is the reality. Most of the time people just have no idea. They're shaping their opinions based on what they're seeing in the news and the media. And so once you bring that home and connect it to their faith, that really does bring that home for them. That was a huge part in passing the payday ordinance here in Arlington. One of the city council members was a member of the same parish, the St. Joseph's here in Arlington, and so having Father Kelly, look at him and say, this is your beliefs coming to play. Like, you get to live out your beliefs based on what you decide to do. And that was a huge turning point. Once he was able to make that connection, seeing Father Kelly stand before him every time, he was really able to make those connections and connect that back to his gospel call.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. And Lucas Swanepoel from CCUSA is also going to weigh in on this question.
Yeah, and I'll just briefly to really echo what Shannon said, be in touch with your Catholic conference or your local Catholic charities who have advocacy outreach coordinators. And then obviously at the federal level, be in touch with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Be in touch, sign up for Washington Weekly for Catholic Charities USA. Because I think oftentimes both organizations I know provide those avenues for you to be in touch with your legislator at the federal level. And as always, as any kind of active citizen, follow what your member of Congress is doing. If they're back in town, if they're having a listening session, go and participate. I think that's the best way you can really be a voice out there, is to really be engaged and articulate as to what you care and why you care about it.
Thank you. And I'm conscious of time, and we do intend to wrap up at 3 o'clock. However, there are some additional questions that have been submitted. So for those who wish to do so, after we have some final announcements and a closing prayer, those who wish to remain on the line, we will go through these remaining questions, and our presenters will stay on to answer them as best we can. So that having been said, I'm going to hand the baton back to Joyce Heitinen for some wrap-up and a closing prayer, and then we will follow up with the concluding questions.
Yes, thank you, Scott. Just to highlight on the announcements, the email, you can sign up for email and you'll receive Parish Social Ministry news and notes and daily Lent devotions from CCUSA. It's at the bottom of the page and you click on email sign up. Lastly, before we close in prayer, I do thank, on behalf of PSM leadership team, you, the listeners, for engaging, for participating, and for all the work that you do every day to provide help and hope for so many. You do a lot of good and make a big difference, so we congratulate you, we applaud you, we need you, and we thank you for joining us today. And we'll close with our closing prayer. Gracious and loving God, let your Spirit be with us and guide us. Hear our prayers and increase in us the will to follow your Son, Jesus. Help us to draw on the resources of our faith as we use the opportunities of our democracy to shape a society more respectful of the life, dignity, and rights of the human person, especially the poor and vulnerable. We ask this through Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Joyce. And again, if I could echo your thanks to all those who participated today and for what they do on behalf of so many people. Those who wish to remain, thank you for your continued participation. We do have a few more questions to address here. One is, how do you help pastors and priests make social justice more of a priority without having the bishop decree it? And I will actually begin to answer that question. Again, Catholic Charities USA came out with a resource about 11 or 12 years ago, specifically on establishing relationships. It was directed specifically at parish pastors, but it could be true of really all clergy, all priests and deacons. And a couple of key takeaways. It's available on the Catholic Charities USA website in PDF format. I'm happy to share it with those who don't have access to it. But a few of the key takeaways are this. If a pastor does not appear to have to make social justice activities a priority, a relationship can be begun to explore possible future initiatives, but the initiative always needs to come from the Catholic Charities agency, making the effort to meet the pastor, spend time with him, and listen to his concerns, because, and this is true of the principle of subsidiarity, no one really knows the needs of a particular local parish community like the members of that local parish community. So Catholic Charities going to a parish, going to a pastor saying, tell us what your needs are. How can Catholic Charities help? As opposed to, here are ways that you can help Catholic Charities. That is a very common misstep that does not get a relationship off on a good foot. The realities are that many priests are overwhelmed and overworked and may have good intentions to engage in social ministry, but have not the sufficient bandwidth, if you will, to do it. But also, and this is true not just of the recently ordained, but those who have been ordained for decades, very sadly, many of our clergy have not had a strong formation in Catholic social teaching, either in seminary or subsequent to that. And so it is not a matter that was presented to them as a top priority. Thankfully, we have in 2007, Pope Benedict published Deus Caritas Est, a very wonderful pastoral document in which he talks about the essential nature of the church being threefold. Celebration of the sacraments, celebration of the Word of God, and also the exercise of charity. And so we have recent papal instruction, if you will, reminding everyone in the church that engagement in charitable and justice activities is not peripheral or secondary, but is at the very heart of the nature of what we do. And that can be a good reminder for overworked priests and pastoral ministers as to who we are and what we do as the body of Christ. But I don't want to go on too long. Read that document, and that may, it talks about establishing strategic relationships, coming up with memorandums of understanding. You know, best practices are establishing relationships between institutions and not just persons, and so forth. Our other presenters, Shannon, Yvonne, and Lucas, do you wish to add anything about establishing relationship with clergy?
No, I just want to, reinforce that particular point. As I was mentioning it earlier in the webinar, it's really important, and where you start is with the relationship building and building off of that to really become aware of the dynamics and how, you can work with that individual, with your deacon or your pastor, to make a project or an effort happen. So yes, definitely building that relationship.
Thank you. And here's another question. Are there certifications for parasocial ministry training? And Joyce, are you still on the line? I think maybe Joyce rang off. However, the answer to that question is yes, but it varies from diocese to diocese. And I was directing this to Joyce because she is with Catholic Charities of, oh, forgive me, it's the Detroit agency.
I'm here, Scott.
Oh, Joyce,
Yeah.
yes. Do you mind if I put you on the spot to answer that question?
Can you say the question again, please?
Yes. Are there certifications for PSM training? And I thought this might be a good opportunity for you to speak about what you've been doing in the area of certification.
Yes, the Archdiocese of Detroit has established certification for pastoral ministries in various concentrations, and one of the concentrations is for Christian service coordinators, another is for DRE, RCIA coordinator, music director. So there's 3 or 4 elements that are required to fulfill the obligation to then be certified for 5 years. One, I'll give you a few examples of what's required. One is core theological classes that go towards a basic diploma, a certificate from the seminary, or a bachelor's degree. They will go towards that as well. And then ministerial application. So you go to classes that are in your area of concentration, and there's 18 hours of classes. And then lastly, there's a mentorship piece that takes place for about a year. It's about a year's process. So there's more to it, but that's a brief overview.
Thank you. So hopefully that will help an individual who asked this question. Another question, what is the name of that 11-year-old document cited to inform pastors on prioritizing social justice? The name of that document is Together in Work for Justice. Together in Work for Justice. And I think that is just about all of the questions that we have. We do have one final question, and then we will wrap up for today. Do parasocial ministry train non-Catholic ministries on starting a parasocial ministry? Are there trainings for this type of activity? So PSM training non-Catholic ministries. So I'm wondering if that's a question on engaging with non-parish groups that are not, excuse me, necessarily Catholic to collaborate on a particular effort. Shannon, Joyce, Yvonne, do you have any experience in collaborations of that sort that have been fruitful?
Sure. So this is Shannon, and we would meet regularly, about once every 2 or 3 months, with various other religious organizations, just to make sure that we were staying on the same page. And again, that this is something that goes across multiple faiths, the ideal of protecting the vulnerable and serving them. And so as long as we're working towards the same mission, the same goal, and aligned on beliefs, we collaborated and worked together to be able to do that. And so we found that multiple other religious organizations here had a very similar parish social ministry arm of their church, or another social justice type arm that we could work with, that they had established already and worked very similarly to ours.
Yes, and many of the principles involved in Catholic parasocial ministry are easily applicable to members of other faith-based groups. So our resources, our best practices are not exclusive to us. Yvonne, Joyce, care to elaborate at all on that?
Well, I will, go ahead. Well, this is Joyce, and service projects. We work with people of other faiths, in particular for a service day that we had last year, and then for food pantries, there will be a collaboration and in distributing the food. So we do it on that level, and then we have a interfaith community coordinator at the archdiocesan level who sits on a council with members who are of other denominations, and they do things throughout the year collaboratively.
And this is Yvonne. I've also been part of interfaith efforts that, work on different social justice issues, and a lot of the groups, as Scott, you've mentioned, do use Catholic social teaching as, the foundation to a lot of the work that they do. So I also encourage you to, check in with your parish, whether that already exists, because oftentimes you'll find that parishes are doing work with other faith communities, and so something might already be happening that you're unaware of. So yeah, encourage you.
Great, and thanks to everyone. I am very grateful to all of our presenters, and especially to all you who participated. Our next webinar, which will take place probably in late spring or early summer, will be on parish social ministry and volunteer management. So please look for notifications on a specific date, but hope you will be able to join us again. Until then, thank you again, and God bless.